Sustainable Ag Systems Evaluation Program. I'm Robin Shoemaker, and along with Ann Stapleton, we'll be giving you an overview of this the program and all the nuts and bolts of getting an application in. So let me first start with a little background with Sustainable Ag Systems Program to give you some context. This is the third year of running this program at NIFA. There's been about 17 awards, and we've awarded a total of about $167 million in awards. It's a nice sizable sum, and therefore begins to beg the question: what are we getting for our money? What's the bang for buck? And due diligence suggested that we develop this evaluation program to assess the overall program. What the goal of this assessment is to sort of develop a synthesis of the research that's been done across the variety of goal areas, and to sort of synthesize what that is, as well as giving us an evaluation of the effectiveness of the program and the delivery of of meeting its goals. The basic notion behind the Sustainable Ag Systems Program is that it solicits creative and visionary projects that embrace a systems approach towards problem solving and research. It's the idea where the component parts of any system are best understood in the context of a relationship to one another within that system. It supports a interdisciplinary approach to research, and we hope that a transdisciplinary approach emerge from that, the conjointness of these disciplines. It also integrates research, education, and extension activities in all the activities. Some of the goals, specific goals that are identified for the program are, for example, improving ag research and productivity while protecting the environment, enhancing rural prosperity, adapting agriculture adaptation to climate change, value-added innovations, and a variety of other topics that are ongoing. Some of the examples of the projects that have been funded are artificial intelligence for sustainable water, nutrition, salinity, and pest management in Western agriculture. Creating a new bioeconomy for dairies to increase nutrient recycling and enhance productivity. Transforming shellfish farming with smart technology. Read better blue crabs in Maryland. Thriving agricultural systems in urbanizing landscapes, and grassland 2.0 agricultural agroecological transformation of perennial grassland agriculture. The disciplines involved are many and varied: plant, animal breeding, pathology, genetics, engineering, data science, sociology, and economics. So that gives you a quick overview. Now Ann will walk you through the basic process and how to proceed. Ann.
Welcome, everyone. So we just want to talk a little bit about the evaluation program request for proposals. So we have been hearing from Robin what the SAS program itself funds. Here, the particular program that we're discussing today, the evaluation program, is meant to develop a framework to let us understand what has been accomplished and where we should go from here. We're here to answer questions about the specifics of the RFA and provide clarification about this document. Answers to most of the questions are in the RFA. So it is a dense document, lots of text, and has links out to additional documents that are critical for understanding how the program works. So please make sure that you go through and read all of these components and the linked out components about application for this program. So we've done our welcome. We welcome you to the webinar. We'll continue a bit with an overview and some of the details of the program evaluation, and then we'll have a time at the end to respond to questions that are posted. This is another picture of the two folks who are leading this program at NIFA. So the SAS program evaluation has a program code A9211. The leadership is myself, Ann Stapleton, and Robin Shoemaker that you just heard from. So we arrange for the proposals to be received by the agency. We answer your questions. We supervise the process of evaluating proposals and making awards. So we are the program managers for this area. The SAS program more widely has a large team. So beyond us, it's Timothy Connor, Megan O'Rourke, Matt Naguaggio, Kevin Kephart, Suzanne Slutka, and many other contributors from the NIFA team that assist us with this relatively large program that awards large amounts of funding. So let's really get into the details of Sustainable Agricultural Systems Evaluation Program. So this is a new program. So we have had evaluation programs like this in years past, but from the way that this is structured now with these SAS systems proposals, we have not had an evaluation program for this type of program structure. FY21 is the overall SAS program's third year with the 17 previously funded projects that Robin mentioned. Okay, so there's a substantial body of funded work in systems already out there, and there's the intent, and we've already published the RFA for the next year. Okay, so this evaluation part is new. So it's new for FY 2021, the SAS program evaluation. And our goal, as Robin mentioned, is to develop a synthesis and an assessment of the investments that we've made in the past and the continuing investments that will be made through at least 2024. For this evaluation program, we anticipate making one award of up to $1 million. It's a 5-year duration. And I should explain this a bit because this might be new to folks who have not applied for NIFA funding previously. It's a research-only project. And what that means for NIFA is that this is a project that supports gaining new knowledge about our programs. Research and ARC is our broadest category with the most kinds of people eligible and the least restrictions on who can participate and what can be done. So that's why it says research only. So amongst the other kinds of categories that we can award funding for at NIFA. The letter of intent is due March 4th. It's required. So you must submit a letter of intent. We provide basic feedback on that letter of intent to you. And then the proposals, the full proposals are due July 1st. So you have time to take the feedback from the letter of intent, which, as I said, is just basic feedback, whether it is appropriate for the program or not appropriate as it stands. And build your team to put together your proposal for July 1. So our goals here today are really to just provide an overview of the program projects, to talk about the program goals, and to give you a little bit of background about why we have these kinds of program goals. And that's from our guiding documents for federal investments, the USDIC Science Blueprint and Strategic Goals. So the evaluation funded project should provide an assessment. This is an assessment of the impact of the Sustainable Agricultural Systems Program, the past awards, and a roadmap for future priorities as we go forward in funding these systems agricultural projects. Okay. We also would expect to see education programming to support best practices for these programs so that there is, as in any case of an evaluation project, there is documented learning outcomes where best practices are implemented and those are iteratively refined to improve the projects and the measurement. A successful application is thus expected to develop novel methods for assessing these types of projects in sustainable agriculture and projects of this particular type and scale. So methods that meet these goals of both setting the roadmap for future priorities and educating current people who are engaged in these projects now. The synthesis, evaluation synthesis part. So here's where we're looking at a more sort of overview of what investments we've already made, and where you want an assessment of the outcomes that have been developed to date, what kind of knowledge has been produced, how the educational and extension activities and the outreach from those has unfolded, and what tools were developed. We also are especially interested in thinking about gaps. So we want to learn from the assessment evaluation project, what gaps are there, and how we can then consider how to improve provision of transdisciplinary advancements in this integration of research, extension, and education. That is a requirement for these large sustainable agricultural systems projects, but that synthesis into a system itself is something that we want to be able to better understand. How well has that worked, and what can we do to make it work better in the future? So the desired outcome is this comprehensive analysis that will determine the impact of the program in all of these dimensions and in how these dimensions fit together: research, education, and extension, and how well this meets the challenges in overall sustainability of U.S. agriculture and food production. With an investment of this type, we would like to see how well we are moving the needle on advancing this as part of the larger food and agricultural system. So this awardee would work closely with the funded projects, as you can imagine, because we are assessing those projects. We provide implementation and coordination frameworks that are useful to those projects that also support the evaluation process. Can integrate across frameworks that are chosen by individual projects, if that seems like a better strategy. The awardee would also work closely with us, with NIFA staff, in planning and implementation of ways to communicate these approaches, changes, frameworks, and measurements. So in the planning and implementation, for example, of a project directors meetings or cross-project meetings in a way that best fits the framework of the evaluation and lets us understand and develop a strategy to close any gaps and make any improvements. As a partnership with the existing funding projects. Here's some real nitty-gritty. The proposals must address all of these 8 criteria, which I'll walk through briefly, and you can stop the video and record any of these that you would like to look at in more detail. So you must address in a full proposal the identification and development of an analytical approach that can do this, can effectively synthesize and assess the success of the projects that we have already funded. We expect that this would include, or this must include, innovative, qualitative, and quantitative indicators and measures of the projects, and a method of assessing this overall individual and collective effectiveness of the investments that have already been made. Second, identify the key areas, topical areas, knowledge areas that have been covered by our investments so far. And as part of this identification, also discuss the effectiveness in context, in the ability to achieve national agricultural and food systems goals, NIFA departmental goals, and USDA goals, such as those laid out in the science blueprint. So not only do we want to think about the topical areas involved, but how those fit into the larger system. Must ascertain the strengths and weaknesses in our portfolio. So this is sort of related to question 2, identification of these areas, and then discuss the strengths and weaknesses. So what strengths and weaknesses do we have in our existing investments that we can use to shape investments going forward? So across all of the dimensions of investment that are relevant to understanding the importance of sustainable agricultural systems in the larger food and agricultural context, and given the priorities of the agency and the funder. You must identify the key findings and impacts of these projects and the emerging directions in food and agriculture that these projects have developed. So evaluate whether these projects address the challenges that have been identified at the national level, and how they've addressed those and how they have changed in their process of addressing those larger challenges. Ascertain and validate the direct and indirect beneficiaries from the Sustainable Agricultural Systems grant funding that we've already made, and the impacts on diversity in higher education and agriculture. And this is a combination of different types of assessment. So ascertain and validate both direct and indirect beneficiaries using or constructing an evaluation method that lets you reproducibly and reliably measure these impacts. So this is one of the required criteria that places this squarely in the research area, developing these novel kinds of assessments. We require that you build a translational analysis of how the SAS projects can enhance impact within the broader food and agricultural system. So this has been mentioned several times. This is explicitly stated as criteria 6. So 7 is identification of barriers. So again, this is a bit more detail about something we've previously mentioned, that what has limited the impact of our current investments and what do we need to do to improve the investments that we make in the future, and potentially the management of current investments. Okay. And number 8, establish and implement common metrics of performance. So this is a part of the assessment and evaluation process where we look at how we can build this assessment in a sustainable way itself. So how can we establish and implement common metrics of performance that best predict project impacts that can be used in the future? Additional requirements. So as you might imagine, for any federally funded project, the products that are produced must be available for public disclosure and must have a clear plan for how the information will be released and how private information will be handled. So a project might, for example, incorporate national workshops, conferences with proceedings or white papers, which are sort of traditional ways of disseminating information, or might provide other innovative ways of disseminating and managing the data and the products from the evaluation in a way that is available to the public in the future appropriately. So related to that, the applications must include a data management plan, which is kind of what I was talking about here in terms of products available for public disclosure, and a project management plan. In other words, how you will carry out this evaluation project and how you will make sure that you are meeting your targets. And the data management plan really must assure preservation of and ready access to information that's developed. So we take these very seriously. These are the ultimate outcomes of public taxpayer-funded investment in this research. All applications must also budget organizing and conducting an annual project meeting or an alternative structure that meets those same goals to capture progress, identify key things about specific projects, provide any particular frameworks or alignments that are necessary to assist active projects. Next question that we are often asked is about eligibility, and this is related to the research type proposal. So I listed it out here. There's more detail on in the RFA on page 22. So, and this includes a very wide range. This type of request for proposals includes a very wide range of applicants that are eligible to apply. Colleges and universities or research foundations, other research institutions and organizations, federal agencies, private organizations or corporations. And individuals. So in particular, in order to apply for federal funding, you must have a DUNS number, but all of these people are eligible to receive a DUNS number and therefore to apply. And any combination of these kinds of people are eligible. If you have any specific questions about that, please do take a look at all of the criteria that are laid out in the RFA as far as eligibility. We think this is the broadest eligibility that's available at NIFA. Deadlines. So more about deadlines. The letter of intent or LOI deadline is March 4th at 5 p.m. Eastern time. This letter of intent is required. The instructions are available. So please make sure that you actually provide this information in this format. So when they come in, they get checked for these component parts. So it has to be 3 pages. Descriptive title, rationale, hypothesis, objectives, approach. These things need to be easily identifiable in your letter of intent. And please make sure that you include the content that's required in the cover page in terms of the people and the institutions, etc. So just make sure that you do meet that format. We will send those back. We will send an acknowledgement of the letter of intent as soon as we is accepted into our system, and provide details at that point about when we would get back to you. The application deadline for the full proposals is July 1st, 2021, 5 p.m. Eastern time. So there's a fixed deadline, certain time. There's a lot of information to include in these proposals that are, these are filed through grants.gov. There's also extensive information and help available, although please be sure you plan ahead to request assistance. So this is just a short list of the information that's required. So the summary, the narrative, references, logic model management plan, data management plan, information about the facilities is required, biographical sketches in a specific format, conflict of interest. This is really critical for us. So please make sure that you list the conflict of interest in the appropriate format. Current and pending support, so existing projects that you have. The budget justification, and your certification forms. So this is just a partial list. There are also additional things that you will need in order to submit a proposal. So indirect costs for NIFA are regulated at 30% of the total federal funds. So the bottom line of your budget, 30% of that can be indirect costs. So you will need also information about your institution's official negotiated indirect cost rate, because if your institution says less, you are required to use less. Again, details about this are found in the RFA. And if you are at a larger institution that handles grants awards routinely, they can provide additional assistance with any questions you have on that. Deadlines. These deadlines are fixed, cannot be changed. Letter of intent is required and it must be in by March 4th. So please send it in ahead to make sure you get the acknowledgement back from us. The instructions have to be followed. They are checked when the letter is submitted, and the overall application deadline is also a fixed, unchangeable deadline of Thursday, July 1st. Submit the LOIs to the email in the RFA, and here it is again, AFRI-SAS@usda.gov. Full applications will go into grants.gov, and a few sort of hints and tips based on questions we've had in the past. Please be careful to use PDF only for your files. The grants.gov application is not, has many component parts. So ensure that the PDFs are readable. I highly recommend manually or automatically checking the readability of those PDFs to ensure that they do not get uploaded into the system as either gibberish or images. So Your application will be rejected or not reviewed if you're not eligible, didn't submit a letter of intent, are missing any items, or they're in the wrong formats, so PDF only and readable PDF only. You have to use a specific application package in grants.gov, and it has to be in on time. So more general advice based on our past experience is do not wait until the last minute. So really, there's plenty of time from now. So go ahead and plan for this. So pretend the deadline is earlier. And one of the reasons for this is that grants.gov is fairly complex and it's really not easy to troubleshoot the error messages. And the timestamp that's used to accept your proposal is the one that actually completes upload to grants.gov, not when you started it and ran into trouble. So please make sure you allow time for dealing with this large, complex software system and getting your upload up there in the correct format. Lots of additional resources available. So we have a web page for AFRI SAS, and we have FAQs. This covers both the regular program and the evaluation program. We have glossaries that provide, they spell out the many abbreviations that we tend to use, and to provide definitions of some of the key terms in the RFA so that you can figure out exactly what's required. And we have summaries of previously funded projects in our data gateway. The easiest way to find those is to use the program code. And please do contact us with questions. We have one email, it's routinely monitored. If you sending in a request to this email address will get you help faster than any other way. And be sure to read the RFA. It is a dense, complex document with many additional documents linked to it and many other resources. So that is the ultimate source of information that you need. So please do check it carefully. And now we would be happy to take questions.
So I'm looking at the Q&A and it does not look like anybody has submitted any questions. We have a few attendees. If you have questions, please use the Q&A option on Zoom. And for those of you who joined a bit later in the presentation has been recorded and will be made available on the NIFA website.
While we wait for questions, I thought a couple of points I just wanted to emphasize. First of all, that everything that Ann laid out there was drawn directly from the RFA. For example, so all the criteria and all the detailed criteria that must be included in your proposal, all that information is carefully spelled out in the RFA. So it's all available for you. And the other point was about the letters of intent. Our feedback really merely is to encourage or discourage submitting a proposal, and it's based exclusively on the fit for which you define your proposal to be, not on the merits. We don't evaluate your concept based on merits within the LOI, but merely on the fit to the program.
So we do have one question that was posted. Yes, we will be making the recording available. It will take maybe a couple days to get that up on the website, just because we have to add captions and stuff, but the recording will be made available.
As with government recordings in general, there will be both a recording with video and audio and a transcript or captions available in text for accessibility.
Any other questions from attendees? Okay, we do have another question. How specific should we be in the letter of intent?
So as Robin mentioned, the letter of intent is intended to make sure that you are submitting to the right program and you are meeting the criteria that are laid out in the RFA. So that you come from an eligible institution or research foundation or college. So making sure that you are actually eligible to submit, that you have addressed the criteria in the RFA, at least the as much as will fit into 3 pages, but just making sure that you're clear on addressing the evaluation and program goals. So we're not assessing how well you're doing this. We're just making sure that you are applying to the correct program and that you are actually eligible to receive, to have your proposal accepted into our system. Robin, anything to add to that?
No, just the cover page is who you are, what institution. That's all, and then the remaining 2 pages, you address those. I think there was 5 elements that we outlined in the presentation.
Any other questions?
And as questions arise later, you can always shoot an email to the SAS mailbox.
So we do welcome questions. Please send them directly to the AFRI SAS mailbox. Thank you very much for joining us today. We look forward to seeing the outcome of this competition.
Before we conclude, there is just one more question. Is it possible to contact the national program leaders regarding what the potential submitter is thinking in terms of evaluation and whether it would fit with your expectations?
Sure.
Good question. So we cannot provide competitive information to awardees, something that would benefit one person over another. So we're careful about how we answer these questions. What we can say is, yes, this fits the general criteria for this program, or no, this is not an evaluation. This appears to not be evaluation. Perhaps you should be applying for a different program. So that's the kind of feedback that we can legally supply.
Any other questions from attendees? Well, it sounds like that might be it. And Robin, do you have any final remarks?
No, but we look forward to your letters of intent and subsequent applications.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.